My name is Elias, and I've worked the graveyard shift at the last stop for 3 years. It's a place where the highway meets the high desert, a liminal space where the world feels thin, as if the reality of the city has frayed at the edges. My only company is the low-frequency hum of the refrigerated drinks and the occasional trucker who looks like they've been driving since the 70s. At 3:14 a.m., the fog rolled in. It wasn't a natural mist. It was a thick, static gray curtain that swallowed the pumps and silenced the desert wind. Suddenly, the electronic ding of the driveway sensor echoed through the empty store. A car had pulled up to Pump 4. My blood turned to ice. We keep Pump 4 dead. The handle is chained, and the power was cut in 1984 after a freak accident involving a traveler who supposedly vanished while fueling. I watched the grainy CCTV monitor. An old, rusted sedan, the color of a deep, bruised plum, sat idling, its exhaust coughing out plumes of black soot. The driver's door didn't open. Instead, the rear passenger door creaked ajar. A hand reached out. It was impossibly long. The fingers had 4 knuckles each, grayish skin stretched tight over bone, reaching for the nozzle. Despite the chains, the hand lifted the handle with a sickening metallic snap. It began to pump gasoline directly onto the concrete, a shimmering, dark puddle spreading toward the store. "Sir, stop! The pump is disabled," I said over the intercom. My voice sounded tiny, vibrating through the cheap plastic speaker outside. The figure finally stepped out of the car. He was wearing a tuxedo, but as he stepped into the fluorescent light, I realized it wasn't fabric. It was charred, leathery skin stitched into the shape of a suit. He had no face, just a smooth, flat expanse of pale flesh where eyes and a nose should be. But as he turned toward the camera, a horizontal slit began to tear open in the center of that smooth skin, dripping a black, oily substance. It didn't speak with its own voice. It mimicked my own voice from the intercom, perfectly pitched but layered with a wet, gurgling static. "Sir, please stop. The world is disabled." I hit the emergency magnetic locks, the heavy bolts clicking into place with a sound like a gunshot, but the electronic register on my counter chirped a cheerful notification. "Transaction complete. Customer recognized, Elias." My own bank card was sitting in the chip reader. I hadn't touched it in hours. My own face appeared on the digital display under account holder, but in the photo, my eyes were missing. I looked down at my hands. They were turning a translucent, smoky gray, the color of the fog outside. Gasoline footprints began to appear on the linoleum floor inside the locked store, moving from the glass door toward the counter. There was no one there, just the wet, shimmering prints of heavy work boots appearing one by one. With every step the invisible entity took, a memory vanished from my mind. I forgot my mother's face. I forgot the name of my university. I forgot I was a student. By the time the footprints reached the edge of the register, I wasn't Elias anymore. I was just a hollow shell in a uniform, staring at a faceless man in a tuxedo who was now holding my car keys and wearing my skin like a new coat. The restrooms at the last stop are located around the back of the building, accessible only by a narrow, unlit concrete path that smells of damp earth and old iron. I was mopping the floor at midnight, the chemical sting of bleach heavy enough to make my throat feel raw. The middle stall was locked from the inside, the occupied sign glowing a faint, dirty red. I assumed it was a weary traveler, but then the knocking started. Thud, thud, thud. It wasn't a knuckle on wood. It was a wet, heavy sound, like a slab of raw meat being slammed against the metal door. "Occupied?" I asked, leaning my weight on the mop handle. A voice replied, but it didn't come from a throat. It sounded like air escaping a punctured tire, a whistling, wheezing sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I'm almost finished, Monsi. I just need the measurements for the shoulders. You've grown since I last saw you in your sleep." I looked at the gap under the stall door. There were no feet. Instead, there was a pile of discarded human skin, folded neatly like a fresh set of laundry. Beside the skin lay a pair of rusted surgical shears and a spool of black industrial thread. I felt the air leave my lungs. I hadn't told anyone my name was Monsi. I wasn't wearing a name tag. "I'm calling the police," I whispered, my boots sliding on the wet floor as I backed toward the exit. "Why bother? They won't recognize the body anyway," the voice hissed. The stall door didn't swing open. It began to bubble and melt, the heavy steel turning into a black, organic sludge that dripped onto the floor like tar. From the darkness emerged a figure of raw, exposed muscle and pulsing blue veins. It had no skin, only the glistening wet red of a body turned inside out. It held a long silver needle threaded with what looked like human hair. It began to recite my life story, the secret fears I'd never whispered, the exact moment I felt a chill while studying alone in the library, the birthmark on my hip that only I knew about. It knew the geometry of my body better than I did. It reached out a flayed red hand and whispered, "Hold still. This only hurts until the stitching is complete. You'll be much happier as the version of you that stays here in the dark." I bolted for the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. But when I looked back through the glass of the storefront, I saw myself, a finished version of me, with a plastic smile, already standing at the register, handing a receipt to a customer who didn't notice the faint black stitches running behind my ears and down my throat. I pulled into the station because my fuel needle had been buried in the red for 20 miles. It was a beautiful facility, impossibly bright white tiles, shelves stocked with perfectly aligned snacks, and a clerk who looked like a porcelain doll with unblinking glass eyes. I filled my tank, paid in cash, and pulled back onto the highway, relieved to be back on the road. 10 minutes later, I passed the same station. I figured I had accidentally taken a loop or missed a turnoff, so I kept driving, my eyes glued to the asphalt. 10 minutes later, there it was again. Pump 1, pump 2, pump 3, pump 4. The same rusted sedan was sitting at the edge of the lot, its headlights dim. I pushed the car to 110 miles per hour, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, determined to break the loop. The odometer was spinning, miles piling up, but the scenery never changed. The dark, flat desert floor stayed identical, and the glowing neon "open" sign of the station appeared on the horizon every few miles, like a glitch in a video game. I pulled back into the lot, sobbing, and ran inside to confront the clerk. "How do I get out? Where is the highway to Jaipur? Where is the exit?" The clerk didn't move his lips. A pre-recorded, distorted voice came from a speaker hidden in the ceiling tiles. "You don't leave the last stop, Monsi. You just become part of the inventory. Everything here is accounted for." He pointed a stiff plastic finger toward the snack aisle. I walked over, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The bags of chips weren't filled with food. They were clear, vacuum-sealed pouches containing flickering holographic images. One was labeled "First Day of BBA." Another was "Meeting the 17th Subscriber." They were my memories. Every time I had passed the station on the infinite loop, the pumps hadn't been putting gas into my car. They had been siphoning the identity out of my brain. I looked in the mirror above the soda fountain. My reflection was fading, becoming a blurry, low-resolution image filled with digital static. I reached for the door handle to run, but my hand passed right through the metal as if I were made of smoke. I was becoming a ghost of the highway. The clerk reached under the counter and pulled out a fresh, crisp uniform with my name embroidered in red silk on the chest. "Your shift is starting," the speaker chirped. "The next car is pulling in. They're running on empty, just like you were. Make sure you smile when you take their memories." I turned to the window and saw a car approaching in the fog. The driver looked exactly like I did an hour ago, terrified, desperate, and looking for a place to rest. I picked up a cleaning rag and waited for the bell to ring.
My name is Sarah, and I've spent 6 months reviewing the security tapes for The Last Stop. Most nights are boring, just truckers buying caffeine and the occasional coyote wandering through the light of the pumps. But then I found the tape from October 14th, the night the new clerk started. On the tape, the station is empty. At 2:14 a.m., a woman walks in. She's young, wearing a university hoodie, looking tired. She walks to the back to mop the floors. On the screen, everything looks normal. But if you pause the video at exactly 2:14:03, there's a 25th frame, a single frame that shouldn't be there. In that split second, the woman isn't mopping. She's standing perfectly still, staring directly into the camera lens, with her mouth stitched shut with black wire. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a digital glitch. I played the tape forward. The woman on the screen finishes mopping and walks back to the register. A customer pulls up, a man in a high-end SUV. He walks in, buys a pack of gum, and leaves. But when I checked the 25th frame of that interaction, the man wasn't holding gum. He was holding a human heart, still pulsing, and the clerk was smiling a wide, impossible grin that reached her ears. I felt a cold sweat break out. I looked at the live feed of the store, the camera showing the now. I was sitting in the back office, watching the monitor. I looked at the screen, and then I looked at my own hands. On the monitor, my hands were covered in dark, thick oil. In real life, they were clean. I reached up to touch my face. On the monitor, my fingers were hooked into my own eye sockets, pulling the skin upward. In real life, I felt nothing but my own cold skin. Then, the intercom on my desk chirped. It wasn't the ding of a customer. It was the sound of a tape being rewound at high speed. Skeech! A voice came through the speaker. It was my own voice, but it sounded like it was being played through a broken record player. "Stop watching the past, Sarah. Look at the 25th frame of the present." I looked back at the monitor. The live feed showed me sitting in the chair, but behind me, in the 25th frame, the new clerk from the October tape was standing. She had her hand on my shoulder. She was holding a long silver needle and a spool of black thread. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't move. I looked at the monitor again. In the live feed, I was screaming, but in the room with me, there was total, suffocating silence. I realized then that I wasn't the one watching the tape. I was the tape. The new clerk leaned into my ear and whispered the final truth. "Every time someone watches this video on YouTube, we get a little more of your skin. Thank you for the views, Sarah. You're almost finished." I looked at the camera lens in the corner of the office. I didn't see a lens. I saw a human eye, unblinking and wet. The video didn't end. It just looped back to the beginning. 2:14 a.m. I picked up the mop. I walked to the back, and I waited for the next person to hit play.
That's the end of tonight's stories. If any of them stayed with you, you know which one. Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. I'll see you soon.